Khamzat Chimaev was the most hyped up prospect since Conor McGregor. And Jesus Christ, everyone kept saying he was going to become the first ever triple champ. Trying to avoid seeing this take is like trying to avoid a Khabib fan on Twitter. It's just impossible. And it's time we put on our investigation cap, use our noggins for once, and see how Khamzat went from being the literal Hulk, the Terminator, the King Kong of the UFC, to now looking like he's going to retire because he won't get out of his own way, and Dana and the fans are fed up because he has a serious amount of issues and he has a very troubled past, and I mean eerily dark past, almost like we don't really know what's going on. But enough gatekeeping from me. Let me start by breaking down his weird but awesome entrance to the UFC. Coming into the UFC, like most fighters, he was dominant outside the organization. He was finishing all of his fights before being signed and even knocked out Ikram, who replaced him, and I'm not sure when this is being uploaded, but man, I hope Rob gets the job done. Anyways, Khamzat comes in, and keep his weight in mind here because this is a part of the issue with our man Khamzat Chimaev. He comes in, he submits John Phillips at 185 on July 15th, 2020, and then 10 days later, on July 25th, he knocks out Reese McKee at 170. Now that is pretty badass work. Now look, if you were around back then, I'm sure you remember, you could not hide from people talking about how badass that was, and can you blame them? This dude did not get hit in either of his fights. He comes out looking like an anime villain, announcing his presence, not to mention this dude looks terrifying. He looked like the kind of guy that would want to fight Batman. Like, god damn, this brother called himself the Wolf too. He is that dude. And he's from one of those countries that's close to Russia, but not actually Russia. He got a badass name. He was born in Chechnya, and he trains in Sweden, and he's 6'2", and has never been hit in the octagon before. Like, this dude was terrifying. Because then, a few months later in September, he moved up to 185 again, and knocked out Gerald Mershart in under 20 seconds, which just solidified him because that was one of the greatest knockouts you will ever see. Granted, Gerald isn't exactly a world beater by any means, but still a knockout that quick through 3 UFC fights without getting hit is insane. But then his first scare of retirement happened that almost brought an end to everything. But before we get there, if you're enjoying this video, if you can leave a like and subscribe, I would really appreciate it, and let me know what you want to see next, and let's get back to it. In late 2020, Khamzat got hit with COVID, and it was really bad. Khamzat at the time was around the age of 26, and they were not sure how or if he was going to recover. And his battle with COVID looked as though he might have had to retire early. During this time, he felt he made his COVID situation worse because he got booked twice against Leon in that time, but both times had to pull out. Some people theorized that this battle with COVID permanently damaged his lungs, which would explain some of his cardio issues. But correlation does not always equal causation, and I feel that due to the fact that he literally almost died, and what we're going to talk about more later on, it's so clear that he has immune system issues. But Khamzat wasn't the only hype fighter that was having issues during this time. The legendary Zabit Magomedshapirov. Look, you guys are always coming at me with how I pronounce names. I'm trying, man, but that's hard. That's hard. Give me a break there. He was one of the most hyped featherweights in a long time, and he ended up retiring early as well due to his immune system issues too. Now, in the story of Khamzat Chimaev, though, he does recover, and after a year layoff, he comes back to fight the Leech. And there was a lot of questions around Khamzat, and although we feel empathy and sadness for what happened, let's be honest here, we're MMA fans. We're ruthless, and a lot of fans thought that Khamzat wouldn't be the same, and this was the time to punch that Leech money line and make some serious cash. And now there's some underlying ethical issues there that might make that seem messed up. But anyways, Khamzat didn't get hit again and subbed the Leech in the first round and ragdolled, and I mean literally throwing the Leech around. Jesus Christ, this should have been a yellow card. He is making the Leech look like a child. He's making him look like a toy. He's playing with him, and all of a sudden he just decided that he had enough fun, and while he's talking to Dana, he put him to sleep. The Leech, man. Like, Jesus Christ. Khamzat was back, and he was better than ever, and he was scary. And then the rumbling started of the first ever triple champ, because he was only around 27 years old at this point. Him grabbing the welterweight belt, then moving up to fight Izzy, to then fight Glover or Yuri, that all seemed like the perfect plan. Too perfect. And some people thought due to John Jones not coming back, there was an idea of Khamzat getting Usman, Izzy, and John Jones on his hit list, which is pure fantasy, but let's be honest here, there was a real chance of that happening after seeing his performances. If you didn't at least have the thought, you're either a bigger hater than Khabib fans, or you've got to be the most unfun person to be around. Like, could you imagine if Khamzat went through that run to become triple champion? Like, you've got to be the most unfun human being alive. Like, you got to be the type of person that Jared Cannonier is trying to be around. I'm sorry, Jared. That was mean. I like anime. You like anime. Anyways, after massacring the now fan favorite to Leech and still not getting hit, all those talks just exploded into him becoming one of the most hyped prospects of all time, with things like him versus Conor being talked about at 170, which will happen from now till the end of time. If someone is in the weight class of 145 to 185 and has a little bit of hype around them versus Conor is going to get talked about to no ends, which is hype and all, but let's be honest, all of us want to see McGregor versus Buckley. Man, oh man, that is the fight to make. I would take no cards for the rest of the year if it meant getting McGregor versus Buckley. That would be more hype than McGregor versus Khabib too. McGregor versus Joaquin Buckley? Like, what are we talking about here? But it was at this point where Khamzat's media presence also reached a whole nother level, because everyone's fan favorite Liverpool legend Darren Till decided to move camps to train with Khamzat in Sweden, and their social media game just reached another level. The brotherly duo took over. They were in each other's interviews, and it seemed like they were both going to help each other become bigger stars and better fighters, and as we're going to see, it did not pay off for either of them. Well, it really didn't pay off for Darren. He's on Jake Paul's undercard now, but you know, you can't hate. He's getting in his bag. But the Darren and Khamzat combination seemed like a recipe for championships. But then Khamzat got paired with the next level, a true destroyer of the highest order, someone that was bigger than the Leech and a man on a mission in Gilbert Burns. This fight ended up being one of the most viewed fights in the history of the UFC channel, and not only that, but it's the definition of a fight you show your friends to get them into the UFC. But this fight also marked the start of the downfall of Khamzat. Despite it being one of the greatest 3-round fights of all time, Khamzat got hit in this fight a lot, and he also got dropped, and we saw him gas out terribly and fight irresponsibly and wild, because Gilbert Burns is that dude, and the fight being a back and forth split decision that's basically impossible to score, with many thinking Gilbert won, and when you rewatch the third round, it still could go either way, and we saw someone that relied so heavily on aura and being a monster look shocked in the face of one of the world's best. Now look, calm down. I hear you typing out your comment already. Gilbert Burns, I'd like to see how you do against him. He's one of the best in the world. Yes, I understand that, but we're literally talking about Khamzat Chimaev being triple champ and not being touched in the fight to that fight happening, and his next fight didn't make matters any better. But before we jump into his next fight, we need to look at the championship picture so you guys understand the dates around these events. Khamzat fought number 2 in the world Gilbert Burns in April, and in August 2022, Leon Edwards fought Kamara Usman, and you know, he sent that boy to the shadow realm, cross, head kick, pound for pound, headshot, dead type shit. And at that point, it was really obvious that Khamzat Usman was the fight to make and the biggest fight to put on, but Rocky put a wrench in those plans. So knowing Kamara was going to rematch Leon, Khamzat made the biggest mistake of his career and agreed to fight Nate Diaz in September, which was a fight that made no sense. And I mean, this literally might have been the pettiest decision by the UFC they have ever made, because Khamzat versus Diaz just didn't make sense for anyone involved, and they really were just trying to use Nate to build up Khamzat. But if you don't know, the build up for this fight ended up being better than the night of fights itself. Between brawls at the press conference that led to it being cancelled, to Nate saying he never wanted this fight and he wanted Francis instead, it was just a really interesting build up, but things went from weird to bad real quick. The night of the weight cuts. If you don't know, the night before weigh-ins is when a majority of the fighters do the bulk of their weight cut, and mid-cut, UFC doctors came in and told Khamzat that he looked unwell and should stop cutting. And some fighters say that getting checked on a doctor is not common, to some fighters saying you can just ignore the doctors and continue your cut. It was really weird. But Khamzat was supposed to fight Nate at 170, but he weighed in at 180. Coincidentally, Kevin Holland versus Daniel Rodriguez on this card was at the catch weight of 180, and Tony Ferguson versus the Leech was also on the card at 170. So what ended up happening was a complete reshuffling of the card, where Khamzat fought Kevin Holland, D-Rod fought the Leech, and Tony fought Nate. Yes, you got that right. The badass Leech fought someone 10 pounds over and he got robbed of a decision. Nonetheless, though, it led to theories because Khamzat and Holland have had a lot of beef, like a crazy amount of beef. And the fight itself didn't help because Holland went to glove touch Khamzat only for him to shoot in and get a takedown and submit him. And then he completely turned heel in the post-fight interview. Now, we're not going to be Sherlock Holmes or anything, but there was a lot of coincidences here. And the public opinion of Khamzat was really up in the air because he started being viewed properly in this WWE and Paulo Costa light. And Dana decided they would never have him attempt a 170 cut again, and Usman vs. Khamzat went up in smoke. But maybe not. But before we get there was another instance of him getting ill after that fight really badly, and he didn't fight from September 2022 to October 2023. He was booked against Paulo Costa, but then Paulo Costa had staph infection and had to pull out, and that led to him versus Kamara, which was an Usman that had lost to Leon twice and had 10 days notice and it was up a weight class. So Khamzat once again was in a lose-lose situation, because if you beat Usman, you beat a fan favorite who's on 10 days notice, and if you lose, Well, you lose to someone on 10 days notice from a lower weight class. And once again, how the fight went was really controversial, with a lot of people feeling Kamara won or at least had a draw. And even if you had Khamzat winning, it could be off control time, not damage, which is just loved by the community. And it was clear if Kamara had accepted it being 5 rounds, he probably would have beat up Khamzat real bad. So at this point, Khamzat's aura had really gone out the window now, which is weird when you think about it because he still hadn't lost, so maybe we're not really being fair. But going from finishing people to barely getting hit to barely winning split decisions, I do get it, especially when you take into account the whole triple champ stuff, which is very much relevant. But now we get to the weird, sad, and dark part of his downfall. People started looking way more into Khamzat as a person and who he was around, and there's some great videos on this from Gaiva and Mark Fighting, but just really overgeneralizing here, Khamzat had connections with a warlord, and the thought is that Khamzat can't come into the United States because of this relationship. And there seems to be a bit of validity to that, considering the fact that he got booked for cards in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, so it does make it hard to get him a fight in general. And with everything going on in that region, let's just say being seen with a warlord from Russia isn't exactly a good idea, and it made even hardcore UFC fans step back and be like, whoa, what is going on here? Now, although there were serious ethical questions around Khamzat, which I don't really want to get into because I'm just like an idiotic YouTuber, I'm not about to go on a rant on things I don't understand. And let's be honest, we probably don't have the full story there either. But where it becomes relevant is the fact that Khamzat got violently ill twice. The first time being some of the craziest swelling I've ever seen, and remember, this is after his COVID scare, and it's really clear that there is a serious issue. And after that, more recently, I'm sure something you're all aware of now, he had to pull out of the Whitaker fight for being violently ill once again. And there wasn't that much information Dana had on his sickness, and the Chimaev camp came out with a picture of him in the hospital. What's important here is Dana said that he hasn't been checked by any of the UFC doctors yet, so they really have no idea what's going on. And expecting him to fly out when he's sick is unreasonable, but why didn't he go when he was healthy? That's where these theories are starting to come in. But I think fans have grown really frustrated with Khamzat, especially considering the fact that he said he had food poisoning, and that's just like what? Like, what are you talking about? You pulled out because of food poisoning? Like, that's clear bait. It's probably not real. And it might have been a literal joke for all I know. But he entered the UFC with so much hype and so many times should have had the title shot, and now fans are just over him. There's been many recommending he straight up retire because of his immune system issues. It's clear that fighting on will only cause him more damage and do more harm than good. And personally, I think he's exciting, he's fun, he's just electric to watch, but it seems like if he continues fighting, he may not be so lucky next time. And he's already had 4 near-death scares from being sick, and at this point, he's walking into really dangerous territory. So what do you think Khamzat should do? If you enjoyed this video, check out this one on ranking every single Dustin Poirier fight. And don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, and we're just getting started. We're going to stay consistent, and I'll see you in the next video.